Amid the scorching sands of Egypt's desert, where the blazing sun seems to sear everything in its path, a river flows, carrying with it untold mysteries and stories. The Nile, with its cool and crystal-clear waters, is not only a lifeline for the people of this land, but also the starting point of an extraordinary tale, a story of destiny and choice. This is the story of Moses, a name that has become a symbol of hope, liberation, and a new beginning. Yet few know that his journey began with suffering, loss, and profound loneliness. Moses' life is not just the tale of one man, but a journey that changed the fate of an entire people. Join Historical Owl as we unravel the historical fragments and secrets behind Moses' life to uncover why he is revered as an eternal symbol of courage and faith. Imagine this, a newborn child, just a few days old, lying by the banks of the Nile under the scorching summer sun. This child has no name, no parents by its side, only the gentle sound of waves and the soft breeze passing by. Its mother, a poor and desperate woman, was forced to make the most heartbreaking decision of her life. She couldn't keep her baby, couldn't protect him from the relentless hunt of Pharaoh, who had decreed the extermination of all Hebrew male infants. With a shattered heart, she placed her child in a small basket, tied it securely, and let it drift down the river, praying for a miracle. As the tiny basket floated along the Nile, the mother's tears mixed with the river's flow, a silent prayer for her child's survival. She dreamed of a better life for him, a life free from fear and oppression. But fate can be merciless, and her hopes seemed to sink deep into the waters. The river carried the basket away, along with the dreams and aspirations of a grieving mother. Yet amidst the sorrow, destiny had a different plan for this child. One afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting vibrant hues across the water's surface, a noblewoman, the daughter of Pharaoh, happened to discover the small basket. She was a woman of strength, wisdom, and deep compassion. When she saw the child nestled inside, an inexplicable wave of emotion swept over her. The baby, with his wide, innocent eyes and soft, smooth skin, touched her heart in a way she couldn't resist. Without hesitation, she decided to save him. She brought Moses into the palace, where his life would change forever. From an abandoned infant, he became the son of a noblewoman, raised in wealth and splendor. As the years passed, Moses grew up in the loving care of his adoptive mother. She taught him everything, from lessons in culture and history to the importance of moral values. Despite the luxury of palace life, she never let him forget his roots, constantly reminding him of the Hebrews who lived in slavery, enduring unimaginable suffering and oppression. Moses, the Prince of Egypt, grew up in a world bathed in the golden glow of the palace, a realm of luxury and power. The palace walls were adorned with vibrant murals depicting the great triumphs of the pharaohs, and lavish banquets were a constant, filled with the melodies of instruments and the echo of laughter. Each morning, as sunlight streamed through the grand doors, Moses would awaken in a spacious chamber meticulously crafted for royalty. Soft beds, exquisite garments, and sumptuous meals awaited him the moment he opened his eyes. Yet beneath this perfect exterior, an unrelenting conflict raged within Moses' soul. He was not only a prince of Egypt, but also the son of a Hebrew woman, a member of a people oppressed and crushed under Pharaoh's rule. Each time he saw the Hebrews laboring tirelessly, their faces etched with suffering, his heart ached. He felt the blood of his ancestors coursing through his veins. And the tug-of-war between two worlds, the splendor of the palace and the anguish of his people, left him restless and unsettled. Moses often felt like an outsider, even amidst the glory and power surrounding him. As he sat at lavish feasts, savoring the finest delicacies, images of the Hebrews with their sorrow-filled eyes haunted his thoughts. They were his people, the ones who gave him life, and whom he could never forget. No matter how alluring his royal existence might be, he longed to act, to make a difference, but he didn't know where to begin. Then one day, a fateful event unfolded, an event that would change his life forever. When Moses witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, a surge of anger erupted within him. It was more than just a clash between two individuals. It was a battle between the two worlds he inhabited. He couldn't stand idly by. He couldn't endure it any longer. In an uncontrollable fury, Moses intervened. He struck the Egyptian, killing him, an act he never imagined himself capable of committing. But in that moment, the inner turmoil he had suppressed transformed into an irresistible force of action. Afterward, fear consumed him. He realized he had crossed an irreversible boundary. No longer a prince, he was now a fugitive. What he had done could not be undone, and there was no path back. He had taken a life, and forgiveness was beyond reach. The next day, when he learned his actions had been discovered, Moses had no choice but to flee. He left the palace, abandoning his royal life, and embarked on an uncertain journey. As Moses departed Egypt, the world around him faded into obscurity. The palace receded into the distance, but the image of the Hebrews, those he had left behind, haunted his thoughts. He didn't know where he was going, but he understood that he needed to find a new path, a way to reconcile with his origins. The royal life was no longer his place, and now he faced difficult choices and challenges he had never imagined. This was the turning point in Moses' life, a turning point from which there was no return. After leaving Egypt, Moses sought refuge in the land of Midian, where peace seemed to be all he desired. He worked as a shepherd, living among the quiet nature and avoiding the turmoil of the world around him. But it was on an ordinary day that his life would be changed forever. One day, like any other, Moses led his flock of sheep up Mount Horeb, a place where he often sought solace during moments of weariness. But today, something was different. As he ascended the stone steps, a brilliant light caught his attention. A small bush, burning with fire but not consumed by it. The flames danced, yet there was no smoke, no scorching heat. He stood there, astonished, unable to take his eyes off the strange phenomenon before him. His mind was filled with questions, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary sight. Moses stepped closer, his feet moving slowly, as if he were entering another world. The fire seemed to beckon him, as if it knew his name, as if it understood his story. And then, in the stillness of the air, a voice rang out, powerful and commanding. "Moses, Moses." The voice seemed to descend from the heavens, shaking the very space around him. He froze, his heart pounding. Who was calling him? Who could produce such a forceful sound from the flames? "This is holy ground. Take off your sandals," the voice continued. Moses felt a deep reverence wash over him. He obeyed, removing his sandals, standing barefoot on the ground where the fire burned. "I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." The voice felt like a cool breeze, sweeping away the anxiety that had plagued him. But soon the doubts returned. Why was God calling him? He was just a simple shepherd, a man who had fled his homeland, a man who had failed to rescue his people. "Return to Egypt," the voice rang out, stronger than ever. "You will free the Israelites who are living in slavery." The words were a shock, propelling Moses into a battle he never imagined. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh? How can I rescue the Israelites?" he asked, his voice trembling with doubt. The skepticism hung over him, making it impossible to see the path ahead. But God reassured him, "I will be with you. I will perform miracles through you." These words were like beams of light piercing the darkness within Moses. His heart swelled with a newfound strength, as if something immense awaited him. He recalled the pain, the loss, and the dreams left unfulfilled. He had once been a man full of ambition, but reality had shattered those hopes. Now, a new mission was being entrusted to him. An opportunity not only to change his own life, but the lives of an entire nation. Moses felt the hesitation in his heart begin to dissolve. He looked at the fire, feeling the power and authority of God flowing through his veins. "If I go, what will I say to the Israelites? They will ask me for your name," he asked, his voice filled with a hint of hope, a touch of anticipation. "Tell them, I am who I am has sent you," the voice replied, a promise that Moses would not be alone on this journey. Moses took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air of Mount Horeb. He had once been a shepherd, but now he felt as though he was becoming a leader, someone with responsibility for his people. He was no longer just a shepherd, he was a guide, a deliverer. This fateful encounter marked a turning point in his life. From a man in hiding, he would now rise as a hero. As the light from the fire illuminated his face, Moses felt a surge of hope. He was no longer a failure, but the chosen one. A man who would stand up to Pharaoh's power and speak on behalf of his people. The peaceful life he had sought was now replaced with a mission greater than himself. And in that moment, amid the burning bush, Moses found himself. He had found his purpose, his reason to live, to fight, and to become the leader his people needed. It was still foggy when Moses returned to Egypt, a place where he had endured years of suffering, where his people were enslaved and oppressed. The image of Pharaoh, a stubborn man who refused to listen to God's word, appeared in his mind like an impenetrable wall. Moses had been given a divine mission, a noble task to free the people of Israel from their chains of slavery. But before him, Pharaoh stood, arrogant and cold, as if nothing could shake his resolve. Moses entered the palace, where golden lights shone brightly and the walls were lavishly decorated. He stood before Pharaoh, his heart filled with determination, yet not without anxiety. He had witnessed God's miracles, and now he had to deliver his message to Pharaoh. "Let the people of Israel go, so that they may worship their God," he pleaded. But Pharaoh only sneered, his eyes cold as stone. "I do not know the God you speak of," he replied. "You may go, but I will not free anyone." And so God sent the first plague. The waters of the Nile turned to blood. The image of the river running red as blood, fish floating dead on the surface, the stench spreading everywhere, left Egypt in a state of defilement. The people panicked with no water to drink, and chaos ensued. Pharaoh remained unmoved. He only saw the people's helplessness, not realizing that this was a sign from God. The second plague struck. Frogs. Frogs swarmed every corner, from the kitchen to the bedroom, from the dining table to the bed. Their croaking was deafening, preventing anyone from sleeping. Pharaoh begged Moses to plead with God, but when the frogs departed, he returned to his stubbornness. "You cannot make me fear," he declared, and Moses could only shake his head at his ignorance. Then came the third plague, lice. Lice appeared everywhere, invading both people and animals. The itching bites became unbearable, causing the people of Egypt to suffer. Pharaoh remained unmoved. He sat there, arrogant as though nothing had happened. "This is just a minor storm," he said, but in reality, everyone was living in fear. The fourth plague was flies. Flies swarmed all over Egypt, filling every nook and cranny, from the fields to the houses. They buzzed and landed on everything, making life unbearable. Pharaoh still refused to free the Israelites. He stood firm, as if the suffering of the people was not his concern. The fifth plague arrived, the death of livestock. All the Egyptian livestock died, while the livestock of the Israelites were safely protected. The carcasses lay scattered, the stench of decay spreading, sending the people into a panic. Pharaoh remained unchanged. He did not recognize that this was a clear sign from God and continued to live in his arrogance. The sixth plague was boils. Strange boils appeared on the bodies of both people and animals in Egypt, causing pain and suffering. Pharaoh remained stubborn, refusing to relent. He could not understand that each plague was a warning from God, a call for him to repent. The seventh plague came, hailstorms. Hail fell from the sky, destroying crops and property. Fierce storms shattered everything in their path. Pharaoh remained hard-hearted, unwilling to acknowledge that God was displaying his power. He sat in his palace, unable to feel the pain of the people. The eighth plague was locusts. A massive swarm of locusts descended upon Egypt, completely destroying the remaining crops. Pharaoh still refused to relent, still failed to see the devastation that God had sent. He only saw what he wanted to see, not what was unfolding before him. The ninth plague was darkness. A thick darkness covered Egypt for 3 days, so thick that no one could see one another. Only the people of Israel were unaffected. Pharaoh still would not relent, still refused to free the Israelites. He lived in the darkness of his own making, unaware that the light of God was shining. Finally, the 10th plague came, the death of the firstborn. Every Egyptian family endured the pain of loss, from Pharaoh's son to the child of the lowliest slave. This tragic death caused Pharaoh to finally submit. He knelt before Moses, tears streaming down his face. "Go, leave this land," he cried, his voice filled with despair. With Moses' unwavering persistence and the supreme power of God, Pharaoh finally had to relent. The Israelites began preparing for their journey to freedom, ready to leave Egypt and begin a new chapter of their lives. They had endured so much, but now the light of freedom awaited them. The first steps on the new path, where there would be no more oppression, no more slavery. They would be free people, living according to their own will, worshiping God without fear. Moses looked toward the horizon, where light began to break. His heart was full of hope, knowing that this journey would not be easy, but with God's guidance, they would overcome every challenge. They would never forget what had happened, but would carry with them valuable lessons to build a brighter future for the next generation. They would be free people, no longer slaves, but children of God, living in His love and light. After Pharaoh was finally forced to allow the Israelites to leave Egypt, another worry arose. The Israelites made their way to the Red Sea, but behind them, the Egyptian army was still pursuing, determined not to let them escape their control. The powerful Egyptian army, with its chariots and cavalry, was closing in, putting the Israelites in a perilous situation. The Great Sea stood before them. The enemy army chased from behind, leaving them unsure of which way to go. The Israelites stood motionless by the Red Sea, their eyes fixed on the horizon, where the endless blue waters stretched far and wide, yet their hearts were filled with anxiety. They didn't know where to go or what the future held. Behind them, the thundering sound of hooves echoed, and the gleaming chariots of the Egyptian army drew closer, determined not to let them escape control. Every passing second felt like an eternity, and fear and helplessness gripped them tightly. Moses stood among the crowd, his gaze turned toward God as he prayed silently. He knew this was not the time for panic, but a moment to remain steadfast and trust in the guidance of the Almighty. He remembered the miracles God had performed before, the wonders that had brought hope to His people. But now, with the vast sea ahead and death chasing from behind, the challenge seemed insurmountable. As the sound of hooves grew louder and the enemy's shadow became clearer, fear spread through the hearts of the Israelites. They exchanged worried glances, their whispered prayers filling the air. They didn't want to turn back, didn't want to return to the place of suffering where they had been slaves. Yet with death closing in, they felt as though all hope was lost. In that moment, Moses heard the whisper of God, instructing him to lift his staff. It was a simple, yet powerful command. Without hesitation, he raised his staff, and instantly, a miracle unfolded. The Red Sea began to part, the waters rising high on either side like towering walls, creating a dry path through the heart of the ocean. Light reflecting off the water created an ethereal scene, as though heaven and earth were merging. The Israelites stood in stunned silence, unable to believe their eyes. They saw the vast pathway open before them, a seemingly impossible escape. They felt the presence of God, a force beyond anything they could imagine. The towering walls of water beside them served as a divine shield, filling them with faith and hope. Step by step, they began to walk forward, hurried yet resolute. Children clung tightly to their parents, women cradled their children, and the men led and protected their families. They weren't just crossing a path, they were stepping into a new future, a life of freedom they had long dreamed of. Behind them, the noise of the Egyptian army grew louder, but they no longer felt afraid. They believed God was with them, guiding them to safety. They could hear the roar of chariots and the shouts of their enemies, but those sounds felt distant, unable to shake their newfound resolve. As they moved deeper into the sea, the towering walls of water remained steadfast, bearing witness to this extraordinary miracle. They looked up at the clear blue sky, the sunlight beaming down as a symbol of life and hope. They felt God's presence, like a guiding light and a sustaining hand. But as they neared the other shore, the sound of Egyptian hooves grew deafening. They glanced back to see their pursuers charging forward, relentless in their pursuit. A renewed wave of anxiety swept through them, but Moses held firm in his faith. He knew God would not abandon them. And just as the Israelites stepped onto the opposite shore, another miracle unfolded. The sea waters suddenly surged back with a mighty force, crashing down like a colossal wave and engulfing the entire Egyptian army. Terrified screams filled the air but were swiftly drowned out by the roar of the waves. All that remained was the serene silence of the Red Sea, a solemn witness to God's miraculous deliverance. The Israelites stood on the shore, gasping for breath, their wide eyes fixed on the sea. The towering walls of water were gone, leaving only a calm surface. They could hardly believe what had just transpired, but their hearts swelled with joy and gratitude. They had been saved. They had stepped out of the darkness of slavery and into the light of freedom. This moment was not just a physical victory, but a testament to faith, perseverance, and the boundless power of God. They had faced trials and overcome fear, and now they stood firm, ready to embrace a new life. A new chapter of history was beginning, and they knew that no matter the challenges ahead, they would never be alone. God would always be with them, guiding them on the path of freedom. Later, atop Mount Sinai, where thick clouds and the rumbling thunder seemed to echo divine warnings, Moses stood amidst blinding light and received the 10 Commandments directly from God. These were not merely simple rules, but a sacred covenant, forming the foundation of Israel's morality and law. The 10 Commandments guided their ethical conduct and defined the relationship between humans and God. However, while Moses was on the mountain, the Israelites succumbed to weakness and faithlessness. Unable to endure his absence, they fell into confusion and demanded that Aaron, Moses' brother, create a god for them to worship. Aaron, in a moment of weakness, gave in. He fashioned a golden calf, a symbol of false worship. The Israelites, in their folly, forgot the miracles God had performed for them. They bowed before the golden calf, worshiping it as a deity. When Moses descended the mountain and witnessed this scene, his anger became uncontrollable. He hurled the tablets of the 10 Commandments to the ground, shattering them, a gesture that reflected the profound betrayal of the sacred covenant the Israelites had received. Yet his anger did not last. Within him, another fire ignited, a fire of love and compassion. He pleaded with God to forgive his people, and God, in his boundless mercy, heard Moses' prayers. He allowed the 10 Commandments to be inscribed again on new stone tablets. This reconciliation not only saved the Israelites from punishment, but also served as a reminder of God's infinite mercy. It is both sorrowful and beautiful that even in the darkest moments, humanity has the chance to return to God, to seek forgiveness, and to start anew. The Israelites learned a valuable lesson about loyalty, steadfastness in faith, and the importance of remembering the miracles God had done for them. After leaving Egypt, the Israelites began a long and arduous journey through the desert, a place where trials and hardships awaited them. The desert was harsh and unforgiving, filled with challenges. There was no food, no water, and the blazing heat of the sun seemed to burn away all hope. Life in the desert felt almost unbearable. Yet Moses, guided by God, persevered in leading them. God provided manna from heaven and water from the rock, but the Israelites continued to complain and rebel. They displayed a lack of faith and loyalty, seemingly forgetting the miracles God had performed to deliver them from slavery. Moses faced not only physical challenges, but also negativity from his own people. They frequently grumbled and protested about their difficult lives and the lack of provisions. Despite this, Moses remained steadfast in his leadership, holding absolute faith in God's words. He resolved disputes, addressed discontent, and often pleaded with God to forgive his people. Their time in the desert was not just a physical trial, but also a lesson in patience, obedience, and loyalty to God. Moses bore a heavy responsibility, acting as both a leader and an intermediary between God and the Israelites. He witnessed human frailty, disloyalty, and a lack of trust, but he also saw the power of mercy and forgiveness. Each day taught Moses that perseverance and faith in God were essential to overcoming any challenge. Finally, as the Israelites approached the Promised Land, Moses faced a harsh reality. Though he had led them through this long journey, a mistake in a moment of despair barred him from entering the land himself. In sorrow, yet with understanding, Moses accepted God's will. From the mountaintop, he gazed at the Promised Land from afar, a poignant reminder that not all dreams can be fulfilled. But what mattered most was obedience and loyalty to the mission God had entrusted to him. Moses lived a life filled with challenges, but he left the Israelites an invaluable legacy. The lessons of loyalty, patience, and love continue to echo in the hearts of his people. The Israelites learned that even in the face of trials, they could always find God's guiding light. The commandments Moses received from God were not just rules, but the foundation for a meaningful life, centered on God. Throughout this long and arduous journey, Moses became a symbol of perseverance and leadership. He demonstrated that even in the most challenging times, faith in God and dedication to one's mission could help overcome all obstacles. The lessons from Moses' life will forever resonate with the Israelites, a reminder that in the darkest times, God's light will always lead them forward. The life of Moses, a great figure in history, is not merely a story of miracles and wonders. It is a journey full of challenges, where faith and courage guided him through seemingly insurmountable difficulties. From his early years as a prince in the Egyptian palace, Moses was raised in wealth and power. Yet deep within, he felt a profound connection to his people, who were enduring the chains of slavery. His longing for freedom and justice propelled him to stand against oppression and lead the Israelites out of the land where they had suffered so much. Moses' journey was far from easy. He faced numerous challenges, from confronting Pharaoh to leading millions through the barren desert. For 40 years, he learned to trust in God's guidance, even when circumstances seemed hopeless. In times of difficulty, he prayed, seeking direction and strength from God. He was not just a leader who fought, but also one who listened, sought forgiveness, and reconciled. His life teaches us a valuable lesson. In the toughest times, faith and patience will see us through. Moses' legacy to humanity lies not only in the Ten Commandments or the liberation of the Israelites, but also in a profound lesson about loyalty and trust in God's guidance. These values, formed thousands of years ago, remain relevant and applicable to modern life. In today's world, where uncertainty and challenges persist, Moses' story reminds us of the importance of holding on to faith, enduring hardships, and seeking guidance from a higher power. Reflecting on Moses' life, we can see that each of us faces unique trials. These may be challenges at work, in relationships, or within ourselves. But if we learn from Moses' absolute obedience to God's will, we can find the strength to overcome those barriers. Let faith become the light that guides us in dark times, and remember that no matter what, we are never alone. So, we've journeyed together through the turbulent life of Moses, from a great Egyptian prince to a hero of the Hebrew people. But have you ever wondered how the lessons from his life apply to our modern world? Do values like courage, justice, and determination still hold the power to transform a nation or even the world? If you want to delve deeper into other dramatic moments in history, don't forget to subscribe to Historical Owl to join us as we explore legendary figures and untold stories. There are plenty of fascinating and mysterious tales waiting for you. Click on the next video to uncover more hidden secrets of history. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss a single story. Thank you for joining us today. See you in the next video.